It was December 5, 1872, when the British brigantine Dei Grazia spotted something strange drifting in the Atlantic Ocean about 600 miles west of Portugal. The ship they found was the Mary Celeste, sailing eerily with her sails partially set and no one at the helm. There were no distress signals, no visible damage, and no signs of a struggle. Everything seemed in order, except for one chilling fact. The ship was completely abandoned. This wasn't a ghost story. It was a real vessel, a real crew, and a real mystery that would go on to haunt maritime history for over 150 years. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to the people aboard the Mary Celeste. It's one of the sea's most enduring puzzles, and it all begins long before that mysterious discovery in the Atlantic. The Mary Celeste was originally built in 1861 in Nova Scotia, Canada, under the name Amazon. She was a brigantine, a two-masted merchant ship just over 100 feet long, and her early years weren't exactly smooth sailing. In fact, she seemed cursed from the start. On her very first voyage, the Amazon's captain suddenly fell ill and died. Then, she collided with another ship in the English Channel and had to be repaired. Later, she even ran aground and was considered a total loss before being salvaged. After several years of bad luck, the ship was sold to American owners in 1868, extensively refitted, and renamed Mary Celeste. It was during this new chapter that the mystery truly began to take shape. The man in charge of her final voyage was Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs. He was 37 years old, deeply religious, and by all accounts, a smart, cautious, and experienced seaman. He came from a well-known New England maritime family and had invested heavily in this voyage. He even brought along his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. The rest of the crew included 7 men, most of them also American. Briggs had personally selected them, and records suggest they were capable and reliable sailors. There was nothing unusual about this trip. The Mary Celeste was set to carry 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol from New York to Genoa, Italy, a fairly routine cargo run across the Atlantic. The ship left New York Harbor on November 7, 1872. It was delayed a few days by bad weather, but eventually set off with good conditions. That was the last time anyone ever saw the crew alive. Nearly a month later, on December 5, the Dei Grazia, captained by David Morehouse, spotted the Mary Celeste off the coast of the Azores. What's eerie here is that Morehouse actually knew Captain Briggs. They weren't close friends, but they had reportedly dined together in New York before setting sail. That connection made what happened next even more unsettling. As the Dei Grazia drew closer, it became clear something was wrong. The Mary Celeste was moving, but it looked aimless. No one responded to hails, and no one was visible on deck. A boarding party was sent over, and what they found has baffled investigators ever since. The ship was in decent condition. It wasn't sinking. There was about 3.5 feet of water in the hold, not unusual for a wooden ship in the open ocean. The cargo was mostly intact, except for 9 barrels that appeared to be empty or damaged. The crew's personal belongings were untouched. There was food and water aboard to last 6 months. Even the ship's logbook was still there, with the last entry dated November 25, just 10 days earlier. But the lifeboat was missing. And so were all 10 people: Captain Briggs, his wife and daughter, and the entire crew. There were no signs of violence, no blood, no struggle. The only odd clues were that some of the ship's sails were badly torn, and the compass was broken. Otherwise, it was as if the crew had vanished into thin air. The Dei Grazia crew split up, with some of them sailing the Mary Celeste into Gibraltar to claim salvage rights. But the British authorities were immediately suspicious. An official inquiry was launched by the Vice Admiralty Court, led by a man named Frederick Sully Flood, the Attorney General of Gibraltar. Sully Flood became convinced there had been foul play. He suspected the Dei Grazia crew had killed the people on board the Mary Celeste to claim the salvage reward. But no evidence of violence could be found, and despite intense questioning and investigation, that theory fell apart. Eventually, the court ruled that there was no proof of a crime. The Dei Grazia crew received a reduced salvage reward, and the Mary Celeste was returned to her owners. But the question still hung in the air: what happened to the people? As the years passed, countless theories emerged. Some blamed pirates. Others thought the crew had mutinied. Some suggested the alcohol cargo had leaked fumes, scaring the crew into abandoning ship temporarily, only to be lost at sea. One idea was that a sudden seaquake or waterspout had startled them into thinking the ship was sinking. But none of these explanations fully fit the evidence. And so, the story only grew more mysterious. What we do know is this: the Mary Celeste was found in seaworthy condition, fully stocked and undamaged. The crew had clearly left in a hurry, but they hadn't taken their valuables or clothing. The ship had been floating for over a week without anyone on board. And to this day, no trace of the people has ever been found. The Mary Celeste reached Gibraltar on December 13, 1872, towed in by the crew of the Dei Grazia. As was standard practice in such cases, the ship and its circumstances were handed over to the British Vice Admiralty Court, which would decide the salvage rights and investigate the abandonment. At first, the situation seemed straightforward. A derelict but intact ship had been brought to port by a crew who had done nothing wrong. But that all changed once Frederick Solly Flood, the Attorney General of Gibraltar, got involved. Solly Flood was a former army officer with a strict, almost theatrical style. From the beginning, he found the story suspicious. Why would a ship be abandoned when it wasn't sinking, wasn't damaged, and still had its cargo mostly intact? And why would the entire crew vanish without a single word of distress? He started by suspecting the crew of the Dei Grazia. Solly Flood wondered if they had come across the Mary Celeste much earlier, boarded it with ill intent, and murdered the crew to claim the ship and its valuable cargo as salvage. But as the inquiry dragged on, no solid evidence supported this theory. There were no signs of violence, no blood, no weapons, and nothing stolen from the ship. Experts examined the vessel. The sails were ragged, yes, but that could have been from storms after abandonment. The main hatch cover was secured, but the forward hatch was open. A makeshift sounding rod, used to measure water in the hold, was found on deck. That might suggest the crew had been checking for leaks. The ship's clock was broken, and the compass had been smashed, possibly by rough weather or damage after abandonment. 9 barrels of alcohol, out of over 1,700, were found empty. Later investigation revealed they were made of red oak instead of white oak, which meant they were more porous and likely to leak. This detail would become central to one of the most popular theories later on. Solly Flood's suspicions weren't enough to accuse anyone of wrongdoing, and eventually the court agreed. The Dei Grazia crew was awarded a salvage payment, though it was less than half of what they'd expected, partly due to the lingering doubts Solly Flood had cast over them. With no clear answers from the court, the public fascination only grew. The story made headlines across Europe and the United States. What had happened on the Mary Celeste? Why had an experienced captain, his wife, child, and crew seemingly fled a perfectly functional ship? Over the next few decades, all kinds of theories emerged. Some were reasonable. Others were completely wild. One of the earliest suggestions was mutiny. Perhaps the crew had turned on Captain Briggs. But this theory didn't hold up. The ship's logs showed no signs of conflict. The captain's personal belongings, including valuables, hadn't been touched. If there had been a mutiny, why would the mutineers abandon the ship entirely? Another theory was piracy. Maybe pirates had boarded the ship, killed or kidnapped the crew, and left it adrift. But again, there was no evidence of struggle or theft. Everything from cargo to money to clothing was still on board. Piracy was also rare in that part of the Atlantic during that time. A more intriguing idea centered around the cargo: denatured alcohol. This wasn't the kind of alcohol you drink. It was industrial grade, highly flammable, and dangerous. What if some of it had leaked, filling the ship with toxic or explosive fumes? One theory proposed that the crew panicked, fearing an explosion. They may have left the ship temporarily in the lifeboat, only to be swept away or lost in bad weather. This theory gained support in the 20th century, especially after chemical scientists studied the likely behavior of alcohol vapor in enclosed ship spaces. In 2006, an experiment conducted by German scientists demonstrated that alcohol vapors could cause a powerful but invisible pressure wave explosion. Not a fiery blast, but enough to frighten a crew. And since the Mary Celeste showed no burn marks, it fit. Then there's the theory of natural disaster. Could a waterspout or sudden storm have struck, making the crew believe the ship was about to sink? This might explain why they left so quickly, and why the hatch was open and the sounding rod was out. They could have been checking for flooding. But again, the ship wasn't severely damaged, and it remained afloat for at least 10 days after they disappeared. Another compelling theory involves human error and misunderstanding. Captain Briggs may have misread the amount of water in the hold. If the pumps weren't working properly, there's some evidence one was clogged. He might have believed the ship was taking on too much water. Combine that with the leaking alcohol barrels and bad weather, and it's plausible he decided to evacuate temporarily. But that decision would have required trusting the lifeboat in open ocean, a risky move. And if they were hoping to return, why didn't they tie the lifeboat to the ship? Or if they did the line break? These are questions no one can answer. As the decades rolled on, more fantastical theories surfaced. Some said the crew was taken by sea monsters. Others blamed aliens. And of course, a few suggested supernatural forces, ghosts, curses, or even the Bermuda Triangle, though the ship was far from that region. One thing everyone agrees on: Captain Benjamin Briggs was a serious, thoughtful man. He had no reason to stage a disappearance. His family and crew left no clues. Their fate remains a blank space in history. The ship itself, however, did not vanish. After the events of 1872, the Mary Celeste was cleaned up and put back into service. But her unlucky streak continued. She changed hands several times, never turning a profit. One owner even tried to commit insurance fraud by intentionally wrecking her in 1885 near Haiti. Ironically, the same ship that had once been suspected of being too well preserved to be abandoned now had to be destroyed to get rid of it. By the end of the 19th century, the Mary Celeste had become legend. But unlike many legends, this one is backed by logs, official reports, and eyewitnesses. The ship was real. The people were real. And their disappearance has never been explained. As time passed and sensational theories lost traction, researchers and historians began to revisit the Mary Celeste mystery with a more practical lens. Many of the original theories had relied on assumption or stretched the facts. But when you strip away the legends, the real evidence still tells a strange, unsettling story. Let's start with one of the most widely discussed modern ideas: the alcohol fume explosion theory. As mentioned earlier, the Mary Celeste was carrying over 1,700 barrels of denatured alcohol, a highly volatile substance. The fact that 9 barrels were found empty or damaged, and were later identified as being made from more porous red oak, suggests they may have leaked. What happens when alcohol fumes build up in a confined space? Scientists believe it's entirely possible for these fumes to create what's known as a pressure wave explosion, a powerful, sudden burst of air, flame, or sound without producing a full fire or visible damage. In 2006, a team of scientists led by Dr. Andrea Sella recreated this kind of vapor explosion using a model of the ship's hold. The result? A dramatic blast of heat and noise, but no lasting burn marks, just as the Mary Celeste was found. Imagine you're the crew. You smell strong alcohol fumes. Maybe you hear hissing or feel a strange warmth in the hold. Then, suddenly, there's a loud bang. It doesn't destroy the ship, but it terrifies everyone. You think the rest of the cargo could blow at any moment. Would you stay? Maybe not. This could explain why Captain Briggs might have ordered an emergency evacuation, especially if he thought the ship was about to explode. In his haste, he might have hoped to reboard once the danger had passed. But if the lifeboat got separated from the ship, or if weather turned against them, the crew would be lost. This idea fits a lot of facts: the missing lifeboat, the quick evacuation, the intact cargo, and the lack of damage. But it still doesn't explain everything. Why didn't they leave behind a note or a signal? Why take the risk of abandoning a ship in the middle of the ocean? Another respected theory focuses on equipment failure and misjudgment. When investigators examined the Mary Celeste, they noted that the main pump was partially disassembled. Some believe this was due to maintenance or clogging from sawdust, possibly making it difficult to accurately measure how much water had collected in the hold. There were about 3.5 feet of water in the ship when it was found, enough to be concerning if you didn't know how much more was coming in. Without a working pump or a clear reading, Briggs may have thought the vessel was sinking. Combined with worsening weather and the presence of his wife and child, he may have decided it was safer to evacuate. But again, why not tether the lifeboat? Some speculate they did. Maybe the line snapped. Or maybe they intended to stay close, but drifted out of reach faster than expected. Others have considered seismic activity, such as underwater earthquakes, so-called seaquakes, which are known to occur near the Azores, the region where the Mary Celeste was last logged. A sudden tremor could have made the crew think the ship had hit something or was about to sink, especially if the movement was followed by unusual wave patterns or strange noises. The resulting panic might have led them to abandon ship, never to return. Then there's the more human theory: paranoia and miscommunication. Even a seasoned captain like Briggs could have made a decision under pressure that he later regretted. After all, he wasn't just a captain. He was a husband and father with his wife and child aboard. That emotional weight could have factored heavily into a sudden decision, especially if several small issues, water in the hold, a disabled pump, leaking cargo, bad weather, combined into one big fear. What's striking is that none of these theories provide a complete answer. Each one makes sense in some ways, but has gaps in others. And perhaps that's why the Mary Celeste has remained such a compelling mystery. It's not a story of ghosts or pirates. It's a story of real people, facing real dangers, in a time when communication was limited and the ocean was a vast, unpredictable force. Let's not forget, this was 1872. There were no radios, no distress signals, no way to call for help. Once that crew left the ship, they were at the mercy of the Atlantic. There's also the personal angle. Captain Briggs wasn't some reckless adventurer. He had invested his own money into the cargo and the ship. He had brought his family. Every indication is that he was deeply committed to the voyage and the safety of those on board. So whatever caused him to abandon ship must have been serious enough to risk everything. As time went on, historians tried to piece together timelines. The last logbook entry was dated November 25th and mentioned sightings of the Azores. The ship was found on December 5th, meaning it had likely been drifting unmanned for about 10 days. That makes the abandonment date relatively clear. But the conditions on that day remain a mystery. Weather logs from nearby ships and islands suggest that November 25th and 26th saw rough seas and strong winds. Not enough to sink a ship, but enough to cause worry, especially if compounded by other concerns, like leaking cargo or faulty equipment. But in all these reconstructions, one thing remains missing: eyewitnesses. No one ever found the lifeboat. No bodies were recovered. No messages in bottles, no signals, no traces. The Mary Celeste story ends not with answers, but with silence. Even decades later, the mystery continued to inspire fascination. In 1884, Arthur Conan Doyle, yes, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, wrote a short story inspired by the Mary Celeste, which he called J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement. In it, he fictionalized many details and created a dramatic, if inaccurate, version of the tale. His story was so popular that it cemented many false beliefs into public memory, including the idea that blood was found on board, which it wasn't. In truth, many of the eerie details people associate with the Mary Celeste today, bloodstains, signs of struggle, food still cooking on the stove, are fiction. The actual records show a more subtle, more chilling truth: a ship left floating in good condition, crew gone, with no sign of where they went or why. And maybe that's what makes the mystery so powerful. It's not about monsters or ghosts. It's about the ocean itself, and how easily it can swallow people, even in the age of sails and seasoned captains. Captain Benjamin Briggs was born in Wareham, Massachusetts, on April 24, 1835. He came from a family of sea captains and was known for his devout Christian faith and dedication to his profession. In 1862, he married his cousin, Sarah Elizabeth Cobb, and they had 2 children, Arthur and Sophia Matilda. By 1872, Briggs had invested in the Mary Celeste and took command for its voyage to Genoa, Italy, bringing along his wife and 2-year-old daughter, while leaving their son in the care of his grandmother. Briggs carefully selected his crew for the voyage. First Mate Albert G. Richardson was married to a niece of one of the ship's owners and had previously sailed with Briggs. Second Mate Andrew Gilling, about 25 years old, was of Danish descent. The steward, Edward William Head, was newly married and came with a personal recommendation. The 4 general seamen were Germans from the Frisian Islands, brothers Volkert and Bos Lorenzen, Arian Martens, and Gottlieb Gaudskall. They were described as peaceable and first-class sailors. The Mary Celeste was found adrift in the Atlantic Ocean on December 5, 1872, by the British brig Dei Grazia. The ship was in seaworthy condition, with its cargo intact, but the crew was missing. Despite extensive investigations, no definitive explanation for the crew's disappearance has been found. Over the years, numerous theories have been proposed, ranging from mutiny and piracy to natural disasters and alcohol fumes causing an explosion. However, none have been conclusively proven. The most widely accepted theory suggests that a combination of factors, such as rough seas, a malfunctioning pump, and the presence of volatile cargo, may have led the crew to abandon ship temporarily, only to be lost at sea. The mystery of the Mary Celeste has captured the public's imagination for over a century, inspiring numerous fictional accounts, including a short story by Arthur Conan Doyle. The ship's tale serves as a poignant reminder of the perils of sea travel and the enduring allure of unsolved mysteries. The Mary Celeste's enigmatic story has captivated imaginations for over a century, inspiring a wealth of fictional retellings that blend fact with creative speculation. One of the earliest and most influential was Arthur Conan Doyle's 1884 short story, J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement, which presented a fictionalized account involving mutiny and murder. This tale, published in the Cornhill magazine, significantly shaped public perception of the incident, introducing elements that were not part of the original case. The mystery also found its way into cinema. In 1935, Hammer Film Productions released The Mystery of the Mary Celeste, also known as Phantom Ship, starring Bela Lugosi. The film offered a dramatized version of events, further entrenching the ship's legend in popular culture. More recently, the 2000 film Haunting of the Mary Celeste continued this tradition, weaving supernatural elements into the narrative. Beyond fiction, the Mary Celeste has been the subject of numerous documentaries and scholarly discussions. The Smithsonian Channel's 2007 documentary, The True Story of the Mary Celeste, examined various theories, including the possibility of a malfunctioning pump and faulty navigation instruments leading to the crew's decision to abandon ship. The ship's enduring legacy is also evident in commemorations. At Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia, where the Mary Celeste was built, a monument honors the vessel and her lost crew. Additionally, postage stamps have been issued by Gibraltar and the Maldives, celebrating the ship's place in maritime history. The Mary Celeste's tale has become emblematic of the sea's mysteries, symbolizing the allure and danger of maritime exploration. Its story continues to intrigue, reminding us of the ocean's vastness and the secrets it may still hold. The mystery of the Mary Celeste has intrigued historians and researchers for over a century, but it hasn't been an open and shut case. Over the years, experts have conducted new investigations, revisited the original evidence, and used modern technology to piece together details that might have been overlooked in the past. In the early 2000s, the Mary Celeste once again captured public attention, and researchers began to revisit some of the early theories with new insights. One of the most significant advances in recent decades was the improvement in understanding the cargo the ship was carrying, the denatured alcohol. The ship was hauling more than 1,700 barrels of this highly flammable substance, and scientists have now conducted experiments to see how it might have influenced the crew's decision to abandon the ship. A breakthrough came in 2006 when Dr. Andrea Sella, a chemist at University College London, conducted a series of experiments with ethanol vapors. Using the same kind of denatured alcohol that was carried by the Mary Celeste, Dr. Sella and his team recreated what could have happened in the ship's hold. Their tests showed that a buildup of alcohol fumes could have created an explosive burst of air, enough to panic the crew into thinking the ship was in danger. These experiments demonstrated that such an explosion wouldn't leave behind burn marks but could still have caused the crew to fear an imminent disaster. If this theory is accurate, it suggests that Captain Briggs and his crew may have had good reason to leave the ship in a hurry. But it doesn't explain why they didn't leave any kind of clear message. The lack of a note, signal, or any kind of communication remains one of the most perplexing aspects of the case. Did the crew intend to return to the ship, but were caught by a sudden change in weather? Was it just a freak accident? Or did something else cause them to vanish? In addition to alcohol fumes, another theory gaining traction in recent years is the possibility of a sudden environmental disaster, such as a seaquake. Seismic activity in the region of the Azores, the area where the Mary Celeste was last seen, has been well documented. Experts suggest that a sudden underwater earthquake could have caused the ship to shake violently, perhaps leading the crew to believe that the vessel was sinking. In fact, there are numerous accounts of seaquakes in the Atlantic Ocean that have caused ships to suddenly list, rock, or shake without warning. If a seaquake occurred while the crew was asleep or at work, it could have been the catalyst that led them to abandon the ship. While seaquakes are not as well known as other natural disasters, their impact on sailors can be dramatic and terrifying, especially when coupled with the other stresses of long-term voyages. Despite these potential breakthroughs in understanding, there are still many unanswered questions. In 2007, the Mary Celeste made headlines again when a team of researchers from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, conducted an underwater survey of the wreck site near the Azores. They used sonar and other modern underwater exploration technologies to attempt to locate the remains of the ship or any possible clues that had been missed over the years. The team found nothing. Not a single piece of evidence pointing to the fate of the crew. No signs of wreckage, no human remains, no life rafts, and no communication. This failure to find new clues was, in many ways, more frustrating than if they had found something definitive. It only reinforced the eeriness of the mystery. The Mary Celeste had been out there for so long, adrift and empty, with no clear answers. One of the more promising avenues of research in the modern age has involved examining the ship's logs and the various personal documents of the crew. When the Mary Celeste was discovered, its last log entry, dated November 25, 1872, was short and unremarkable. It described the ship's position near the Azores, but it didn't mention anything about a catastrophe or distress. Many historians have since questioned why the last log entry would be so nonchalant, considering what happened afterward. Did Captain Briggs make that entry before abandoning ship, or was it written during a calm moment, hours or even days before the panic set in? There is also the troubling question of how the ship itself was found. Although the Mary Celeste was in reasonably good condition when it was discovered by the Dei Grazia on December 5, 1872, it was still partially flooded, with 3.5 feet of water in the hold. This fact has led some to believe that the water could have been caused by a malfunctioning pump or other faulty equipment. If the ship was taking on water and there was no way to control it, the crew could have easily assumed that the ship was sinking. But again, this doesn't explain why the crew would have abandoned the ship and left behind valuable items like personal belongings, a full stove, and even the ship's navigational instruments. If they were fleeing a sinking ship, why not take the navigational tools? Why not take provisions? In the early 2010s, some new hypotheses began to emerge from maritime historians. One of the most compelling ideas centers around human error and psychological pressure. Maritime voyages in the 19th century were fraught with uncertainty and danger. The Mary Celeste crew had already experienced issues before the fateful voyage. There were reports that the ship had previously been in a state of disrepair, which could have led to mistrust among the crew. Could the crew have been so overwhelmed by fear of their ship's instability and their captain's orders that they panicked, abandoning the ship without thinking clearly? Could a poor decision have led to their eventual doom? This psychological theory suggests that the combined pressures of the ship's condition, harsh weather, and the volatile nature of the cargo led to an irrational decision, a snap judgment made in a split second that they could never undo. In the most recent analysis of the Mary Celeste mystery, historians have focused on the passage of time. The theories of the past were often influenced by the sensationalism of the time, but modern scholarship has taken a more cautious approach. By focusing on the maritime context of the 19th century, including the often perilous conditions of long ocean voyages, researchers have come to a more balanced understanding of the circumstances. There is also a sense of closure that many modern historians seek. The Mary Celeste remains a fascinating enigma, but in some ways, it stands as a symbol of human endurance. The fact that the ship was not destroyed and that its cargo was mostly intact gives U.S. insight into the ship's construction and the professionalism of the crew. It was a highly competent crew, and they may have been faced with a series of events that simply spiraled beyond their control. Still, the truth behind the disappearance of the Mary Celeste may never be known for certain. It continues to occupy a strange place in history, a real maritime mystery that has inspired countless theories, but that may never be solved definitively. But one thing is clear: the Mary Celeste will always be remembered as one of the most perplexing and haunting maritime mysteries in history, a testament to the enduring allure of the unknown. As we draw to a close on the mysterious story of the Mary Celeste, it's clear that this case has baffled historians, sailors, and mystery enthusiasts for over 150 years. Despite countless theories and modern advancements in research, the true fate of the crew remains a riddle that may never be solved. Yet, perhaps the unresolved nature of this story is what continues to captivate the human imagination. The Mary Celeste is more than just a historical incident. It's a symbol of the unknown, the vast mysteries of the sea, and the eerie silence that can engulf even the most well-traveled ships. In a world where everything is often explained and laid bare, there is something uniquely unsettling about a case like this, one that seems to defy explanation, no matter how hard we try. The theories we've explored offer a glimpse into the wide array of possibilities that could have led to the crew's disappearance. From the explosion of alcohol fumes to the possibility of a seaquake, or even the stress and psychological strain the crew may have been under, there are many plausible explanations. Yet, none of them seem to provide a satisfying answer to all the questions that remain. What makes this case so compelling is the sheer volume of unanswered questions. The lack of any evidence pointing to what truly happened to the Mary Celeste makes it one of the most haunting maritime mysteries of all time. The ship was found fully intact, yet its crew had vanished without a trace. There was no sign of struggle, no evidence of foul play, and no distress signals. In the end, all we are left with is a ghost ship adrift in the Atlantic Ocean, its secrets locked away forever beneath the waves. While the Mary Celeste continues to fascinate us, it also serves as a reminder of the dangers of the sea and the limits of human understanding. Despite centuries of exploration and scientific advancement, there are still events and phenomena that remain beyond our grasp. The Mary Celeste stands as an enduring symbol of the mysteries that continue to elude us, and perhaps it always will. The tale of the Mary Celeste also forces us to confront our own curiosity and fascination with the unknown. Why do we find such stories so compelling? What is it about the sea that draws us in, with its promise of adventure, danger, and mystery? Perhaps it is the vastness of the ocean, its deep, uncharted waters, and the many secrets it holds, secrets that will forever remain hidden from us. In closing, we must acknowledge that the Mary Celeste's legacy isn't just about the unanswered questions. It's also about the cultural impact the ship has had. From literature and film to modern documentaries and discussions, the story of the Mary Celeste continues to live on. Its influence can be seen in the way it's woven into the fabric of maritime lore and its place in popular culture. The Mary Celeste has become more than just a ship. It's a symbol of every mystery that we, as humans, cannot solve, a reminder that there is still much in the world that we do not understand. So, what can we take away from this fascinating mystery? Perhaps it's a deeper appreciation for the unknown. A reminder that not all things are meant to be fully understood or explained. And in the case of the Mary Celeste, perhaps the greatest mystery lies in the very fact that the answers remain forever out of reach. As you reflect on the mystery of the Mary Celeste, we ask you, what do you think happened? Did the crew abandon ship in fear of an explosion, or was it a freak accident? Was there a more sinister force at play, or was it simply a tragic chain of events? The answers may never be known, but the mystery will endure, continuing to spark the imagination of generations to come. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of history's most perplexing maritime mysteries. We may never know what truly happened to the Mary Celeste, but the story will continue to intrigue and captivate us. Until next time, keep wondering, keep questioning, and keep exploring the unknown.